My name is Michael Greer. I'm 38 years old, and last Christmas, my own family shut the door in my face literally. I was standing on the front porch of my parents' house, holding 2 bags of carefully wrapped presents. I'd bought gifts for everyone: Mom, Dad, Jacob, Kelly, their kids, even backup gifts for any surprise guests. For once, I wasn't scrambling last minute. I had decorations in the trunk, cinnamon rolls in a Tupperware, and hope. Then my mom opened the door and froze. Before I could say Merry Christmas, she stepped halfway out and said, "Michael, we don't want you here this year." I blinked. What? From behind her, Jacob's voice drifted out like smoke. "This is no place for losers." My body didn't move. My heart thudded once, hard, then seemed to stop. I looked at my mother. Her hands fidgeted. Her eyes avoided mine. My dad stood in the hallway, staring down at a plant. Not a word from him. And Jacob, he was leaned casually on the staircase rail, like he was watching a sitcom he'd already seen. I laughed, or tried to, a shaky breath with a little noise attached. "You're serious?" Jacob shrugged. "You've been slacking. You didn't even offer to help with gifts this year. The kids notice." I felt the weight of the bags in my hands, the ones filled with presents I'd spent hours picking out. I didn't drop them. I didn't throw them. I just said, "Fine." And I turned around. When I got back to the car, I sat with the engine off and stared at the steering wheel, then the bags, then my reflection in the rearview mirror. That was when something inside me went cold. This wasn't about presents. It never had been. It was about control, about how, for years, I'd played the role they carved for me: the dependable one, the helper, the quiet fixer. When Jacob lost his job, I covered a month of their mortgage. When Kelly's car broke down, I paid the mechanic directly. When school started each fall, I took the kids to Target and let them pick what they wanted. I never asked for anything in return, never expected applause, but I thought naively that maybe they appreciated it. Instead, I was just the ATM who'd started to give less. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch, presents still in the bags, and replayed the scene, over and over: my mother's voice, Jacob's smirk, my father's silence. The word loser echoed like static. Was I one? Because I didn't want to fund a grown man's lifestyle anymore. Because I bought myself a new used car after 12 years of duct-taped mirrors and unreliable brakes. By morning, my anger had settled into something sharper: resolve. I boxed up every receipt, every Venmo notification, every just until next week transfer Jacob had begged me for. I pulled credit reports, combed through my bank history, and totaled every gift since 2015. The number made my stomach turn. I didn't send the total to my family, not yet. I just stopped responding. No more, "Sure, I got it." No more silent yeses. And then the silence started to stretch. No calls on New Year's. No check-ins from my parents. Not even a "how's work" from Jacob. It was like I'd been erased. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't chase it. I sat with the stillness and waited for the fallout. The funny thing about silence: at first, it hurts like nothing else, then it becomes peaceful, and finally empowering. I spent that first week after Christmas in a strange daze. I didn't reach out, didn't text, didn't check the family group chat. My phone was quiet except for a few Merry Christmas messages from coworkers and my friend Darren, who noticed I hadn't posted a single photo from the holiday like I usually did. I didn't respond to him either, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to explain what had happened without sounding like I was making it up. "We don't want you here this year. This is no place for losers." It sounded like something out of a cheap movie script, like a dream you wake up from and roll your eyes at, except I wasn't dreaming, and there were no rewrites coming. By the second week of January, My parents still hadn't called. No. We should talk. No apology. No. Are you okay? I scrolled back through my call log just to double check. Nothing. The group chat was still active. Though, I finally looked. Jacob had posted photos from their Christmas dinner. My old seat at the table was filled by one of his golf buddies. Apparently, everyone looked happy. My mom was holding Kelly's youngest on her lap, smiling like there wasn't a single crack in the foundation. The caption: Family, nothing better than the people who have your back. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then just turned the phone off. That was the moment I started deleting things. My calendar reminders for birthdays, my saved gift lists, in notes, the Target wish lists. Jacob's kids had sent me the year before. I stopped following them on social media. I archived our last Thanksgiving photos. Then I opened my budget app and started over. No more transfers to Jacob's emergency account. No more cash apps with vague titles like utilities or daycare that somehow always became Vegas, and concert tickets the moment I wasn't looking. I canceled the prepaid tutoring sessions I'd set up for his oldest. I sent an email to the soccer league letting them know I would no longer be the anonymous donor covering registration. I didn't make a scene, I didn't send a message, I just stopped. And that's when they noticed. It started with Kelly. Quiet little Kelly who never said much and always looked like she was walking on eggshells. She sent me a single-line text one evening in mid-January. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how things went down. I didn't agree with it. I stared at the message for a while. It felt sincere, but it also felt late. Too late. I responded. I appreciate it, but there's a lot that can't be undone. She didn't reply again. I didn't expect her to. Then came my mom. She called one morning while I was in the middle of preparing a presentation for work. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, her voice syrupy sweet and just a touch too casual. Hi, honey, just wanted to see how you're doing. You've been quiet lately. We miss you. Let's catch up soon. Love you. No mention of Christmas, no mention of what had been said. Just a vague tug at normalcy, like we were supposed to pretend it hadn't happened. I didn't call back. 2 days later, she called again. Jacob says you're upset. I don't know what happened exactly, but we all just want peace. Maybe you're being a little sensitive. But you know how your brother is, he doesn't always think before he speaks. I actually laughed out loud when I heard that. Sensitive, that old card. The family favorite. Because I'd been hurt, because I didn't want to fund Jacob's lifestyle anymore, because I wasn't okay with being discarded the second I stopped being useful. I didn't answer that call either. That's when things turned from concern to hostile. Jacob started sending me messages at first subtle, then more aggressive. You've made your point, now stop punishing everyone. Mom and Dad are worried about you. You're seriously going to let the kids suffer over your bruised ego? And then the kicker. Kelly's talking about pulling the kids out of soccer. They're devastated. All because you're playing victim. I didn't respond, but I did forward that last one to Kelly. She didn't reply in words, but the next day, Jacob's Facebook account went dark. Every post deleted. Every photo gone. Then he reappeared with a new profile, set to private. He was unraveling. But it didn't stop there. One morning, I caught someone snooping around my mailbox. An older man in a work vest I didn't recognize. When I opened the door and asked what he was doing, he mumbled something about address verification for a credit inquiry and scurried off. I froze. I checked my credit report that night. 3 new inquiries in my name. None of them mine. All of them tied to zip codes near Jacob's address. That was when my calm started to crack. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. This was potential fraud. I filed a fraud alert, froze my credit, called the bank, reported everything, opened a new checking account, updated all my passwords. I even put a security camera over the mailbox. No more second chances. No more benefit of the doubt. The next week, I got a handwritten letter from my mother. Yes, a letter. It started with Michael, my sweet boy, and ended with families argue sometimes, but we always come back together. No apology, no admission, just a syrupy guilt trip and a folded flyer for a family reunion in June. I tossed it into the trash without opening the flyer. And then I started remembering flashbacks, little things I'd ignored for years. Like when I bought Dad a birthday gift and Mom said, "That's nice, but Jacob already got him something special." And when Jacob's gift turned out to be a cheap golf towel, but he still got praised for being thoughtful. Or when I took a week off work to help fix their porch after a storm, and Jacob showed up for 20 minutes, took a selfie, and left only to have Mom gush, "It means so much that both my boys helped out." Or that Thanksgiving 5 years ago, when I stayed up until 2 a.m. cooking, and Jacob brought a store-bought pie and got thanked in the toast. I'd let it slide every time. I didn't need the spotlight. Until I realized they didn't even see me in the room. And now they were angry that the invisible son had finally walked out. But here's the thing about being invisible: once you learn no one's looking for you, you stop trying to be seen, you just start living. And that's exactly what I did. I started going to the gym again. I called Darren back and told him the whole story. He didn't even blink. "Man, I always thought your brother was a parasite. Took you long enough." I laughed for the first time in weeks. I started meal prepping, took a solo trip to Colorado, deleted old voicemails, built a budget, bought myself noise-canceling headphones, and stopped attending every family Zoom call just to be polite. I was quiet, but I wasn't sulking. I was rebuilding. Brick by brick. And somewhere along the way, I realized something else. They weren't mad because I changed. They were mad because I stopped letting them take. And now they were going to learn what life looked like without me holding everything together. It had been almost 3 months since Christmas when Kelly reached out again, not with a text this time, but a phone call. She never called me, ever. "Michael," she said quietly, almost like she wasn't sure I'd answer. "Can we talk? It's about Jacob." My stomach tightened. We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over, neutral ground. Her eyes were tired, and she looked like she'd aged 5 years and 3 months. She ordered tea, hands shaking. "I need to tell you something," she began, "and I need you to promise you won't go straight to Jacob." I nodded. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "I think he's been lying to all of us," she said, sliding it across the table. Inside were printed bank statements, screenshots, and notes in Kelly's neat handwriting. I scanned the pages, confused at first until I saw it, a second account in Jacob's name, not their joint checking, not even at the same bank, just his. It was stuffed with deposits labeled from me memo lines like school, utilities, urgent, and then withdrawals, huge ones, hundreds of dollars at a time. To gambling sites, hotel charges. One note said Club Raptor, a bar in the city I'd never even heard of. I looked up at her. "He told you he needed the money for rent?" She nodded, jaw clenched. I believed him. "And then you stopped sending money. And he got erratic." That word stayed with me. Erratic. He'd go on these rants, she continued, about how you abandoned the family, how you were selfish now. But when I found this, she tapped the folder, I realized something. He was never using your money for the kids. My mouth went dry. "How long have you known?" "A few weeks. I needed to be sure before I said anything." She glanced down at her tea. "I talked to a lawyer." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't file anything," she added quickly. "Not yet, but I needed legal protection in case things got worse." That was when I understood she wasn't just informing me. She was asking for help. So I gave it. I made copies of everything. I contacted a financial advisor. I called my own lawyer, someone I trusted from work. And for the first time, I laid it all out, the thousands of dollars, the years of emergencies, the fraud attempts, the way Jacob used my generosity as leverage, turning me into the villain the moment I stopped paying. Mark, the lawyer, whistled low when I handed him the folder. "This isn't just unethical," he said. "This is actionable." "Kelly doesn't want to fight," I replied. "She just wants out. And I want to make sure Jacob can't spin this." Mark nodded. "Then we document everything. And we prepare." And so began the slow, deliberate undoing of Jacob's kingdom. Step 1. I froze every financial path he had to me. Step 2. I drafted an affidavit, signed and notarized, outlining the years of support and the reason I cut it off so no more whisper campaigns could be used against me. Step 3. Kelly met with Mark. Privately, she started separating her finances. She opened her own bank account, started setting aside cash. Meanwhile, Jacob had no idea. He kept sending passive-aggressive texts, "Just checking if you're done pouting yet. Family BBQ this weekend would be nice if you showed your face. Dad's knee surgery was expensive. You know, some of us are chipping in." I didn't reply, I just saved them. Then came the biggest twist of all. Kelly called one evening and said, "He applied for a personal loan using your name." I nearly dropped my phone. She sent me the screenshot and application confirmation email Jacob had left open on his laptop. My name, my birth date, my old address, a forged email that was close enough to mine to look real. I called Mark immediately. "Now we're done playing defense," he said. "It's time to escalate." Within 48 hours, I had a fraud report filed. I flagged it with the lender. I sent them notarized ID copies and proof of the false application. That was when Jacob finally noticed something was off. He showed up at my house. Unannounced. Pounding on the door like a man possessed. I didn't answer. But my security cam caught everything. "You think you're smart?" he shouted. "You think you can just cut us off and play the victim? You ruined everything. Do you hear me? You're dead to me." Dead to me. There it was. The full truth finally spoken aloud. I saved the video, sent it to Mark, sent it to Kelly. She didn't reply, but later that night she texted me 3 words. "I'm leaving soon." A week later, she and the kids were gone. She waited until Jacob left for a weekend golf retreat, which we both knew was code for drinking and poker. She packed what she could, loaded the kids into the car, and drove to another state. She didn't tell him where, she didn't leave a note. She just vanished. And me, I helped fund her move, quietly, through Mark. She offered to pay me back. I told her no. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't being manipulated, I was choosing to help. And that made all the difference. Jacob called me 5 days later, screaming, "You're a traitor, you turned her against me. What did you promise her? Huh? You think you're some hero now?" I waited for him to finish, then said calmly, "No, Jacob, I'm not the hero, I'm just not your fool anymore." And then I hung up. I haven't heard from him since. Not directly, anyway. But mutual friends started telling stories. Jacob was unraveling, losing gigs, burning bridges, blaming backstabbers. Meanwhile, Kelly filed for separation. The court filings included the bank documents, the fake loan attempt, the security footage. She even got temporary custody. And me. I slept like a baby for the first time in months. It was almost poetic. The man who mocked me as a loser had lost everything. And I hadn't lifted a finger. Just one quiet final word. No, the fallout didn't explode all at once. It leaked like a cracked pipe under pressure, spitting venom one rumor at a time. At first it was quiet. Jacob went dark. No texts, no tantrums, no just checking in messages disguised as guilt trips, but I could feel the eye of the storm. Then it began. Mutual friends reached out. "Hey, man, is it true what Jacob's saying, that you bribed Kelly to leave him?" I didn't dignify it with a response, but I did send Mark a heads up. He laughed, dry and low. "It's starting." Kelly stayed hidden, her location sealed tighter than a vault. She'd enrolled the kids in a new school under her maiden name. The lawyer helped her file a restraining order not because Jacob had gotten physically violent, but because the pattern was there. The paper trail, the financial abuse, the manipulations, the threats. Jacob had been the fun dad online, posting toothy smiles and soccer selfies. Now, the silence on his pages was deafening. And then he snapped. One Monday morning, I woke up to an unmarked envelope on my doorstep. Inside photos, printed out, old ones. Me and Jacob as kids, at the lake, on our bikes, Halloween, stuff I hadn't seen in decades. On the back of one was a note, scrawled in red ink. "You broke us." I didn't flinch, I didn't even blink. I put the envelope in a drawer, then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my father. He answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting. "Michael," he said, "I didn't expect to hear from you." "I bet you didn't." Silence. "Then your mother misses you." She could have said that herself. More silence. Then I asked, "Did you know?" He didn't play dumb. He just sighed. "We knew Jacob had issues, but he's family." "So am I," I replied. He didn't answer. "I want you to hear something," I said, then played the voicemail Jacob had left me, the one with the screaming, the cursing, the threats. When it ended, I asked, "Is that family to you?" Still silence. "Tell Mom I'm done playing scapegoat." Then I hung up. That was the last conversation I had with my father. But not the last message I got. Later that week, my mom sent a long, rambling email filled with phrases like, "He's struggling, and you were always so strong, and can't you just let this go?" I didn't reply. I just forwarded it to Mark. He added it to the documentation file, what he jokingly called the Book of Jacob. But then came the final blow. Kelly called me one afternoon, her voice steady but her words shaking. "He found us," she whispered. My heart stopped. "Are you okay?" "He came to the school, said he just wanted to talk to the kids. The principal called the cops. He didn't get in, but the kids are scared." I felt a rage I hadn't known I could feel, but I didn't let it take over. Instead, I said, "We're done playing defense." That night, I sent a full report to the court, complete with every photo, voicemail, text, and screenshot. We requested a hearing for an emergency protective order. The judge granted it. Jacob was served 2 days later. He called me from a blocked number. I didn't pick up, but he left a voicemail anyway. "You think this is over?" he growled. "You think taking my family makes you better than me?" Then softer, like a plea, "You're my brother, Mike. We used to be a team." I deleted the message. He was right. We used to be. Before he saw my kindness as currency, before he treated love like a subscription he could cancel when I stopped paying, before he made Christmas about punishment instead of family. The hearing came and went. Jacob didn't even show. The judge granted Kelly full temporary custody. The restraining order was extended to a full year, with digital contact barred. He tried to email me through a burner. Mark caught it. We filed a report. He tried contacting Kelly through her sister. She blocked him. By April, Jacob had become a ghost in his own life. His credit was in shambles. His job had let him go quietly. Mutual friends stopped replying to his late-night vent messages. One of them texted me, "I didn't realize how deep the lies went. Sorry I doubted you." I didn't need their apologies, but it felt good. Really good. And then unexpectedly came the final scene. One evening in May, I walked out of the grocery store and spotted someone standing near my car. It was Jacob. He looked smaller than I remembered. Tired, unshaven. A shadow of the man who used to smirk at me across the family dinner table like he knew a secret I didn't. "Don't call anyone," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I just want to talk." I didn't say anything. He stepped closer. "You destroyed me." I raised an eyebrow. "I stopped enabling you." "Same thing," he muttered, then added, "You always thought you were better than me." "No," I said, "I thought you were better than this." That hit him. Hard. He stepped back. His eyes shimmered. For a second, I saw the boy I used to race bikes with, the kid who made me laugh when I couldn't sleep, the brother I used to love. But then he blinked, and the mask fell again. "You don't even care, do you?" he said bitterly. "You're just glad you won." I stepped forward, calm and firm. "There's no winning here. Jacob, you lost everything because you treated people like tools. I got tired of being one." He didn't reply. I unlocked my car and got in. Before I drove away, I looked at him one last time and said, "You told me Christmas was no place for losers. You were right." And then I left him standing in the parking lot, alone. Just like he wanted, it's been a year since the door was shut in my face. A year since the bags of carefully wrapped presents sat untouched in the passenger seat while I stared into the cold December twilight, wondering what I'd done to deserve exile. Now, those bags are gone. Donated months ago to a shelter downtown somewhere, kids would actually appreciate the toys without expecting me to pay for the roof over their heads too. My apartment is quieter these days. No urgent calls. No, "Can you help with this bill?" No Venmo requests labeled with lies, just the sound of my own breathing, my own plans, my own peace. I don't talk to Jacob anymore. Not out of anger, out of choice. He tried reaching out one more time in June, a Facebook message this time, just 3 words. "You win, Mike." I didn't reply, because it was never a game. But I did take a screenshot, not to gloat, just as proof for myself that I survived it. Jacob lost more than money. He lost trust. He lost his children. He lost the illusion that charm could carry him forever. Kelly and the kids are doing well. She texts occasionally photos of school projects, silly moments, quiet thank yous that I never ask for. The boys sent me a video on my birthday, mouths full of cake and singing off key. I watched it 3 times. Then cried once. Just once. My parents, they still live in the same house, same furniture, same denial. Last I heard, Jacob moved back in temporarily after his lease expired. That part almost made me laugh. The prodigal son returning home not in glory, but in quiet disgrace. Mom emailed me in July, said the family was ready to forgive and forget. I replied with a single sentence. You can't forgive what you refuse to admit. No answer since. That was enough closure for me. Funny how a year can change everything. I go for morning walks now. I cook real meals. I read again actual books, not just work emails or late-night self-help articles about boundary setting. I even adopted a dog. Her name's Junie, a rescue. Shaky at first, like she didn't know how to accept affection, but now she curls up on my lap while I drink coffee, tail thumping like a heartbeat. She doesn't ask for much. Just presence. Just care. We understand each other. I see Darren more often. He was the one who suggested I try a photography class after I mentioned I'd always wanted to, but never had time. Now I spend weekends exploring old buildings with my camera, chasing shadows instead of ghosts. People always talk about revenge like it's a single, explosive moment. A slammed door. A courtroom scene. A mic drop monologue. But for me, revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was silent. It was walking away and watching the people who called me a loser drown in the absence of my loyalty. It was choosing calm over chaos. Healing over performance. Self-respect over obligation. It was the slow unraveling of their narrative, the one where I was the weak one, the problem, the one who always needed to do better. Turns out, better just meant free. Free from manipulation. Free from conditional love. Free from the belief that sacrificing yourself is noble when it's actually just expected. There's a photo on my fridge now. It's not of family, not in the traditional sense. It's me, Junie, and a couple of friends from the photography group sitting on a rock overlooking a canyon, grinning like idiots after nearly falling into a ravine trying to get the perfect sunset shot. That picture means more to me than every holiday dinner we ever faked our way through. Because that day I felt whole. Not needed, not useful. Just seen. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't shown up that Christmas, if I'd missed the moment they decided to call me a loser, if I'd spent another year bending, appeasing, patching holes in a sinking ship. But then I look around at Junie snoring on the couch, at the stack of photo prints drying near the window, at my own quiet smile in the bathroom mirror, and I realize that door closing was the best gift I never asked for. Because when they shut me out, they gave me permission to let myself in. I stopped living in the shadows of their expectations. I started building something of my own. No applause. No conditions. Just life. And this year, I spent Christmas morning on a trail overlooking the lake. Just me, Junie, and a thermos of peppermint coffee. No ornaments. No passive-aggressive toasts. No golden child theatrics. Just a slow sunrise, a warm breeze, and the soft, undeniable sense that I wasn't alone anymore. I had myself, and that was enough. Final line. They told me Christmas was no place for losers. Turns out it was no place for survivors either. So I made my own. And this time, there's room for everyone who shows up with love. No strings attached. No games. Just peace. And peppermint coffee. Story 2. My name is Noah Hale. I'm 32 years old, and I called off my engagement in front of over 100 guests after my fiancé's parents humiliated my dead mother. It happened at the Halston Grand, a luxury hotel in Midtown. Emma, my fiancée, had always wanted a fairy tale celebration. Glittering chandeliers, imported roses, hors d'oeuvres with names I couldn't pronounce. She got all of that. What no one expected was that the night would end with me standing in front of a shocked crowd, returning the ring. That evening started like a dream for Emma. She floated around the ballroom in a pale gold dress, her hair pinned with little pearls, glowing under the warm lights. Everyone praised the decor, the catering, her gown. No one really noticed me. That was fine. I've never needed a spotlight. But even before I arrived, I had this strange heaviness in my chest, a sense that something was off, like the joy was staged, and I was just playing a role someone else had cast for me. Emma's parents, Raymond and Celeste, were pillars of old money. Think crisp linens, country clubs, trust funds, From the day Emma introduced me to them, I knew I didn't fit their mold. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in a noisy part of town. My mom passed when I was 7, cancer, fast, brutal, and it left my little brother Eli and me with a father who checked out emotionally for years. I basically raised Eli. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Emma knew all of this. At first, she admired it how I put Eli through college, how I built a life from almost nothing. She said it showed strength. But as time went on, I noticed she started distancing herself from the details. She'd correct me when I mentioned growing up in the projects around her friends. She'd laugh nervously if I talked about helping Eli with bills. Still, I loved her. I wanted to believe we could make our backgrounds work. So when Raymond and Celeste approached me about investing in their family company, a high-end construction firm with big ambitions, I saw it as a bridge, a chance to prove myself, not just as their daughter's partner, but as a professional they could trust. It wasn't a small investment. I put in nearly every dollar I'd saved. Money meant for a house, for a future with Emma, for maybe helping Eli finally start his own auto shop. They promised I'd be a stakeholder, that I'd see returns, that I'd be brought into the family fold. Of course, I had a lawyer look at the contract. There were clauses, protection. I wasn't naive. But emotionally, I was all in. The night of the engagement party, I told myself to ignore the tiny barbs, the jokes about Eli not showing up, he couldn't get time off from work, the pointed mentions that I still lived in a starter condo. Then it happened. I was standing with Emma, Celeste, and a few of their friends near the fountain ice sculpture when someone mentioned how much Emma had glowed up since college. One of Celeste's friends, a woman with diamonds for earrings and spite in her smile, said, "Well, she's always been such a kind soul, took after Celeste that way, marrying someone from less. It's just so generous of her." I blinked. Did I hear that right? Raymond chuckled. "Generous is the word, isn't it?" Then Celeste added, with a sip of her wine and a faux whisper, "Honestly, with a mother like his, what did you expect him to become?" That sentence hit me like a slap. My mother, the woman who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, who read us bedtime stories with cracked hands and sleepy eyes, who never saw me graduate high school because her body gave up before her spirit did. With a mother like that, I looked at Emma. She was laughing, not cruelly nervously, but not in shock, not in outrage, not in defense. That's when something snapped in me. I stepped back, heart pounding in my ears. Then I cleared my throat. "Everyone, excuse me," I said loudly enough that nearby heads turned. Emma reached for my arm. I gently pulled away. I faced her parents. "Raymond, Celeste, I want to thank you. Truly, you've made something very clear tonight." Celeste raised an eyebrow. Raymond crossed his arms. "You see, I've spent years trying to earn a place in your world. I gave my time, my money, my trust. I believed that love and effort could bridge any gap. But tonight, I learned that I was never welcome here. Only tolerated. Maybe not even that." I turned to Emma. Her eyes welled with tears. "I loved you. I really did. But love isn't silence. And watching you stand by while your parents insult my family, my mother tells me everything I need to know." I pulled the engagement ring from my finger, placed it gently on the table. My mother may not have been born into money, but she taught me something none of you seem to understand: dignity. I looked around at the stunned guests, at the orchestra that had stopped mid-note. This engagement is over. And I walked out. Into the cold night. Into freedom. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken, no. That came later. That night, I was wide awake with adrenaline, like I'd just escaped a fire I hadn't realized I'd been living inside. The next morning, my phone was a war zone. Texts, voicemails, missed calls, emails, DMs. Most came from Emma. "Noah, please call me." I didn't know they'd say that. I was just nervous. I didn't laugh because I thought it was funny. I didn't know what to do. Her voice messages veered between sobbing apologies and panicked bargaining. Then the tone shifted. "If you don't come talk to me, you're throwing everything away. You humiliated me. Noah, do you even realize what you've done?" She still didn't get it. This wasn't about an argument. It wasn't a lover's spat that a quiet brunch could fix. She let them spit on my mother's memory and didn't flinch. "You can't build a marriage on that." Raymond and Celeste, of course, took a different approach, cold, calculated. That afternoon, I received an email from Raymond's assistant, a professional email, like I was some intern who'd embarrassed the firm at a networking event. Subject line: Re-business discussion. The message was as sterile as a hospital room. Mr. Hale. In light of recent public behavior that may damage our company's image, Raymond and Celeste Hale would like to review your involvement as an investor. Please be advised that their legal counsel is currently reviewing your contractual participation and exploring options for withdrawal. Sincerely, Jennifer Klein, Executive Assistant to Raymond Hale. I smiled. They thought I'd panic. They had no idea. I forwarded the email to my attorney, Sarah Doran, sharp, strategic, and utterly unshakable. We'd worked together for years. She helped draw up the contract when I made the investment into Hale Development, and she'd insisted on clauses that, at the time, I thought were too cautious. Turns out she was brilliant. Within an hour, she replied, "Subject: Hale Development. Noah, I've reviewed the contract again. They can't force you out unless you breach. Public disagreement isn't grounds for dissolution. If they attempt to remove you or freeze your stake, we'll file immediately. You're protected. Also send me all communications from them or Emma going forward. Save everything. Sarah." That night, I got a different kind of message. From Eli, my little brother, who I hadn't told anything to yet. It was just a screenshot. Someone had posted a blurry video clip from the engagement party, me standing there, facing down Emma's parents, declaring the engagement over. The caption read, "This man just called off his engagement after the bride's parents insulted his late mother, in front of everyone. King behavior." It had already gone viral. I blinked, staring at it. What started as a private heartbreak was suddenly exploding into public empathy. There were comments. Thousands. Some cheering me on. Some sharing their own stories of cruel in-laws. Some crying over me. I didn't know how to feel. It didn't matter that my bank account wasn't as big as theirs, that I hadn't grown up in a mansion. These strangers saw me. They understood. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. But Raymond and Celeste didn't like losing. Over the next few days, things escalated. I started hearing from mutual friends, acquaintances, people who'd been invited to the party or had business connections with the Hales. Some told me Raymond was spinning a story that I'd lost my temper, caused a scene, tried to extort them. Others warned me he was threatening to cut ties with vendors who worked with me. Classic power moves. And they were trying to smear me. But something had shifted. People weren't buying it. More videos leaked. More stories surfaced of Celeste's condescending remarks at charity events, of Raymond's casual cruelty to lesser people. One anonymous post from a former assistant simply read, "Everything Noah said that night 100% true. I lasted 6 months working for Raymond Hale. That man has no soul." The tide was turning. And Emma. She showed up at my apartment 4 days later. Hair in a messy bun, no makeup, puffy eyes. She looked like she'd been crying for days. "Noah," she said softly, "can I come in?" I let her, because I needed to see if anything in her had changed. She sat on the edge of my couch, holding her hands together like they were the only thing keeping her from unraveling. "I didn't know what they were going to say," she began. "I was shocked. I was embarrassed. I didn't think they'd go that far." I said nothing. She stared at her lap. "I should have defended you. I should have stopped them. I know that. Her voice cracked. I was scared. Of what I asked, finally. Of them? And there it was. She wasn't cruel, not like them, but she was still under their thumb. Still more afraid of losing their approval than of losing her soul. "You laughed," I said, my voice low. "Maybe not at the joke, maybe not at me, but you laughed. And in that moment, you chose them." She didn't argue. Just nodded. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And maybe she meant it. But apologies can't rewrite what was said, what was felt. I walked her to the door. As she stepped out, she turned back. "You know," she said, "they're going to come after you, hard." I nodded. "Let them." The threat started subtle. A frozen payment here, a delayed email there. My access to Hale Development's shared documents accidentally revoked. The board postponed a quarterly update meeting I was contractually required to attend. I didn't need a crystal ball to know what was happening. Raymond Hale was trying to push me out, not legally yet, but by attrition. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. Sarah, my lawyer, had warned me about this. "They're banking on you folding," she said flatly. "They've done it before. You're not the first person they've tried to silence, but you can be the first one to win." She filed a formal notice of breach the next day. The clause we'd built into the contract quietly, almost as an afterthought, suddenly became a battering ram. Within 72 hours, Hale Development's legal team reached out. They wanted a meeting. "Not without a mediator," Sarah said, chin resting on one knuckle, "and not until you're ready." I was ready. What they didn't know was that I hadn't come to this fight alone. I had Eli. He wasn't just my brother. He was my shadow, my witness, my motivation. After the party, something clicked in him. Maybe it was hearing our mother's name dragged through the mud. Maybe it was watching me draw a hard line after years of trying to belong. Whatever it was, he changed. He'd started working full-time again at a garage downtown, picking up night shifts when he could. He got sober, even started showing up early, unheard of for Eli. We started talking more, not just as brothers, but as people rebuilding trust. Every night after work, we'd sit on the fire escape of my condo and drink cheap tea, watching the lights across the river. "You really think they'll back down?" he asked one night. I shook my head. They don't back down, but they make mistakes when they're scared. And scared they were. The mediation was tense. Sarah and I sat across from Raymond and Celeste's attorneys in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked the city skyline. Raymond didn't even show up. Celeste did barely, her posture stiff, her voice tight. They offered to buy me out. A clean cut, and for everyone's peace of mind. Sarah leaned forward, "At cost." There was a long pause. "Yes," their lawyer said finally. Sarah smiled, "No." Their lawyer blinked. "Excuse me." "No," she repeated. "Not at cost, with interest, plus damages, plus an apology, in writing, to Mr. Hale for the public defamation." "You're joking." Sarah slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, videos, eyewitness statements, A financial audit showing how my investment had helped bridge a cash flow shortfall in Hale Development's expansion 6 months ago. Not a joke. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, I said quietly, but I'm not leaving empty-handed, and I'm certainly not walking away from my own name. We left the meeting with no handshake. 3 days later, they caved. The final agreement, full repayment of my investment plus 12% interest, coverage of all legal fees, a clause barring them from making any public statements about me, and a letter, signed by both Raymond and Celeste, acknowledging my contribution to the company's growth. It wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. But there was one more thing, one last move. I didn't want it to come from spite. I wanted it to come from clarity. I released a statement not to the press, not to social media, just a letter I posted quietly on a personal blog I barely used, a letter titled, "To anyone who's been told they're not enough." It wasn't long. I wrote about my mother, about Eli, about being underestimated, not because of who I was, but because of where I came from. I wrote about love that isn't real love if it disappears when it's inconvenient. I wrote about choosing dignity over acceptance. The post was shared thousands of times. Strangers messaged me from across the world. One woman from Ohio said, "I left my engagement after reading this. Thank you for reminding me I deserved better." I didn't reply to most, I couldn't. But I read every word. And slowly, that fire in my chest that had once been all pain started to warm me instead. One evening, about a month after the dust settled, I was sitting with Eli, same fire escape, same tea. He handed me a little package. Inside was a photo, one I hadn't seen in decades. It was us, me, maybe 9 years old, holding Eli, 5, in my lap, our mom smiling behind us, her eyes soft, her hands on our shoulders. "I found it in Dad's stuff," he said quietly, "thought you should have it." I held the picture carefully, like it might dissolve if I breathed wrong. I looked at our mom, then at Eli, then at the sky. "I think we're going to be okay," I said. He nodded. "I think we already are." A few months passed. Life slowed down, not in a dull way, more like the way your heart finally stops racing after a storm. I was working again, consulting on a few projects, spending real time with Eli, breathing. There were no more voicemails from Emma, no sudden appearances from Celeste, just silence. And it was beautiful. But life, as it always does, had one last card to play. It came in the form of a letter. Not an email, not a text. An actual envelope, handwritten, no return address. It arrived on a Tuesday. I almost tossed it, thinking it was junk, but something about the handwriting caught my eye. Something familiar. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. No signature, just a few short lines. Noah. You don't know me, but I knew your mother. She saved my life once. Literally, I've kept something she left behind. If you want it, I'm in Ridgemont, 412 Maple Drive. LJ. I read it 3 times. It could have been a prank, a scam, but there was something strange in my chest, a tug, like a thread pulled loose from a sweater I didn't even realize I was still wearing. I called Eli. He didn't hesitate. "Let's go." Ridgemont was 3 hours away, a sleepy little town nestled between hills, more trees than streetlights. Maple Drive was just what it sounded like, quiet, tree-lined, the kind of place that felt immune to time. 412 was a weathered white house with green shutters. The porch sagged slightly. Wind chimes danced in the breeze. We knocked. An elderly man answered, tall, lean, eyes sharp despite his age. He wore a faded flannel and looked at us like he'd been expecting this visit for years. "Noah," he asked. I nodded. He didn't speak, just stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and old books. He led us to a small sunroom overlooking a backyard full of wildflowers and empty bird feeders. "My name's Lewis," he said finally. "Your mom. She was my nurse. Back in '91. I'd been in a bad accident. She took care of me for months, more than she had to. She sat with me when the pain was unbearable, talked me off the edge more than once." He paused, eyes distant. "She was light," he said softly, "even when she was carrying her own weight." I didn't speak, just listened, soaking up every scrap. "One night," he continued, "she told me about you, said you were the strongest little boy she'd ever seen, that even when things were tight, you always shared with your brother, that you had this way of being serious and silly all at once." My throat tightened. "She left something with me before she moved away," he said I should only pass it on if the boy ever came looking. "I didn't know if I'd ever see you, but I never threw it out." He handed me a small wooden box. Worn, unmarked, I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a stack of folded papers, slightly yellowed with age, and a photo. It was my mother young, smiling wide, holding baby Eli in one arm and gripping my tiny hand with the other. Her eyes were shining, not in a staged way, in a real way. Beneath the photo were the letters. Dozens of them, written by her to us. Some were to me, some to Eli, some to both. She'd written them knowing she might not get to raise us, each one full of warmth, advice, memories. She talked about her dreams, her regrets, her hopes for us. She told stories about our dad when he was still kind, about the first time she felt us kick in her belly, about the night I told her I wanted to build bridges when I grew up, not knowing what that really meant. I sat on the floor and read every word. It was like hearing her voice again after all these years, like reaching into the past and pulling out a piece of her to hold close. Eli read his in silence. Then he laughed a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from him in years. "She said I used to pretend our cat was a superhero," he said, wiping his eyes. "I forgot all about that." We spent hours there. When we left, Lewis handed me one last envelope. "She wrote this for your wedding day," he said quietly. "I was supposed to send it, but I think she'd want you to have it now." I waited until we got home. Sat on my couch, heart pounding, and opened it. It read, "My sweet Noah, if you're reading this, you're older now, maybe even in love. I hope she's kind. I hope she sees you. You've always tried so hard, even when no one noticed. I see you. And if you're ever made to feel small or unworthy, I want you to remember something. You are enough, not because of what you earn or what you give, but because of who you are. If they don't see it, walk away. You don't have to belong to anyone who makes you feel like a guest in your own life. Love boldly. Stand tall. Be the man I saw in you even when you were just a boy who held his little brother's hand in the dark. I'm proud of you. Mom." I cried. Long and hard. And for once, it wasn't from grief. It was from release. From healing. That night, I sat with Eli again. No fire escape this time, just the two of us, feet on the rug, Mom's letters between us. "I used to think we were alone," he said quietly. "We're not," I said. "We never were." Story 3. Hi, I'm Alex, 28 years old, and 3 days ago, I found out my entire family thinks my sacrifices mean nothing unless they benefit my brother. Thank you for joining me here today. I'd love to hear from you in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let's dive into the story that changed everything for me. The glow of my phone screen lit up the dark bedroom. It was past midnight. I was already in bed, curled beneath an old comforter that had seen better days. I wasn't checking social media or doom scrolling. I was opening my bank app, a habit I'd picked up over the years, a little ritual before sleep, just to remind myself that all the years of sacrifice were amounting to something. But this time, something was wrong. I stared at the number, or rather, the lack of one. Soldado. I blinked. Refreshed. Still zero. For a second, my brain couldn't process it. It must be a glitch, a back-end issue, a technical hiccup. But then I saw it, a completed wire transfer, every cent gone. Over $145,000, my entire house savings just vanished. I froze. My heart thudded. I called the bank's 24/7 line, my voice barely steady. Yes, the agent confirmed. The money was transferred out. 2 days ago, cleared. I felt like I was underwater, trying to scream, but only bubbles came out. That money, it wasn't just savings, it was my future. The result of 5 brutal years working 2 jobs, skipping vacations, saying no to drinks and dinners and new clothes, driving a beat-up Toyota that rattled like a can of coins, all for one dream: a modest house, my own space, freedom. Gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the edge of my bed staring at the floor until dawn broke. Then I drove to my parents' house. The street was familiar, suburban, quiet, too quiet. It felt unreal, like I was watching my own life from outside a window. Their porch light was on. My brother's car was parked out front. I walked in, no knock. They were in the living room. As usual, Dad on the recliner, Mom with her knitting, Mark scrolling on his phone like a king without a care. Mom looked up. "Oh, Alex, everything okay?" I didn't answer. I just held up my phone, showed them the screen. "Well, where's my money?" I asked. They looked at each other. Not shocked, not confused, just resigned. Dad leaned back. "We took it." He said simply, "Mark needed it more." Just like that. No apology, no hesitation. You know that feeling when your stomach drops so fast it makes your ears ring? That? I stood there, numb, as Mom started explaining as if this was reasonable. "You'll understand one day," she said. "He's starting a family. You're young, you can start saving again." I worked for that money, I said, my voice cracking, every single cent. "You owe us," Dad said sharply, "for college, for everything we've done for you. You think you did it all on your own?" Mark finally looked up. "I'm sorry," he said, but he didn't look sorry. "You'll bounce back. You always do." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I wasn't sad, not yet. I was something colder, something quieter. I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind you wear when you've finally seen people for who they are. "Okay," I said. And I walked out. When I walked out of my parents' house that morning, I didn't have a plan. I just had silence, the kind of silence that buzzes in your ears when reality is too loud. The air was crisp. My breath was visible. I could still hear Mark's voice echoing in my mind. "You always bounce back." I got in my car, hands trembling, and just drove. I don't remember much of that drive. I only know I ended up in the parking lot of an old diner 2 towns over. I sat in my car for hours, trying to piece together what had just happened, trying to feel something other than the hollow thud inside my chest. My phone vibrated, 32 missed calls. Texts from my mom, Dad, and Mark poured in like a flood. "Alex, where are you?" "Come home, we need to talk." This reaction is immature. We're your parents, we did what we had to. Don't make this worse than it is. Worse. And they didn't say we're sorry, they said you're overreacting. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every message twisted the knife a little more. By sunset, I checked into a cheap motel off the highway. The walls were thin, the heater wheezed, but at least I could breathe. Day 1. I turned off my phone completely. No messages, no digital reminders of betrayal. I slept, ate something forgettable, took a walk in a quiet park nearby. It didn't fix anything, but it slowed the panic that had wrapped around my ribs. I thought about the money, the hours, the ramen, the second jobs, the missed birthdays, the friends I'd turned down just to save. I thought about how my parents raised me to believe in hard work, then stole the reward. I thought about Mark, always the charming one, the one who fumbled upward, who failed upward, who borrowed without paying back and smiled while doing it. And I realized something. I had always been the plan B, the safe son, the one they could count on not to cause trouble, the one they could lean on until I was flat. I wasn't the favorite, I was the fallback. Day 2. I turned my phone on again. The screen lit up like a fireworks show. Missed calls, voicemails, text after text. You don't do this to family. Mark didn't know the whole situation. We're hurt that you would leave like this. Still no apology. Still no mention of what they took from me. Just guilt. Just pressure. Just gaslighting. That night, I sat with my laptop. I started a document titled Everything They Took. I wrote down every hour I worked, every job I held, every sacrifice I made over the last 5 years. I wrote down every time my parents made me feel like I owed them for being born. And when I was done, I stared at it. 22 pages. 22 pages of my life gone in a click. I closed the file and cried. Not from weakness. From clarity. Day 3. The Seed of Resolve. My friend Jamie called. She was one of the few people who'd stayed close through the years. A quiet friend, steady and sincere. She knew how my family operated. She'd seen it in action. You need to fight, she said after I told her everything, not just emotionally, legally. I don't know how. I do, she replied. Let me connect you with someone. Enter Victoria. A lawyer, sharp, focused, no time for nonsense. I sent her everything, the account info, the texts, even a photo of the old joint account my parents had opened when I was a teen. You might have signed something as a kid that gave them a loophole, she explained. But using that now, as an adult, against your knowledge, that's a different story. She laid it out clearly. It wouldn't be easy. They were my family, but the law didn't care about sentiment, it cared about facts. We can't promise full recovery, she said, but we can make them sweat. We can make it public. And sometimes, that's the pressure they fear most. Day 4, I changed everything. I locked down my financial life. New bank accounts. New passwords. Credit freezes. I called my HR department, explained there was a potential case of financial exploitation involving relatives. They adjusted my direct deposit, added security. I set up alerts on every card, every account, every possible backdoor. No more blind trust. No more leaving the windows open for thieves just because they share your last name. Day 5, I called them. It was short. Just enough to let them know. I know what you did. I'm pursuing legal action. Don't contact me directly again. Everything goes through my lawyer. Silence. Then finally, my mom. Alex, please don't do this. We're family. Families forgive. I didn't reply. because this wasn't about forgiveness. This was about boundaries. I didn't grow up imagining I'd sue my own parents. But then again, I also didn't think they'd steal my life savings and call it balancing the scales. By the end of the week, everything felt surreal. The same people who used to make me pancakes on Saturdays had become adversaries. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted my life back, because they had crossed a line and dared to act like I was the problem. Victoria, my lawyer, wasted no time. She filed a cease and desist notice the following Monday, a formal demand that all further communication go through her office, citing financial misconduct and potential fraud. Within hours, my parents' tone changed. Suddenly, I wasn't ungrateful. I was misguided. I wasn't overreacting. I was hurting. And they understood. But the one thing they didn't say, we were wrong. The meeting. Victoria suggested a mediated meeting. Not to beg, she said, to present leverage. It was set for Friday, held in a neutral office downtown. My parents arrived first, along with Mark. Mark wore a suit that didn't fit. My dad looked annoyed. My mom looked like she had practiced her expressions in the mirror. I walked in last, flanked by Victoria. The room was quiet, tense, no greetings, no hugs, just a long table and cold stares. Victoria went first. She laid out the wire transfer details, the joint account history, the unauthorized access. Then she showed them copies of the texts, the ones where they admitted to taking the money and justified it because Mark needs it more. Now, when she brought up the word embezzlement, my dad flinched. This isn't theft, he argued. We had rights. You had past access, Victoria corrected. That doesn't give you license to take money from an account Alex legally owns, especially without consent. Mark spoke next. I didn't know all the details, he mumbled. I cut in. You knew enough to be okay with it. You benefited from it. He looked away. Then came the worst part, my mom. She wiped at invisible tears and said, We thought you'd understand eventually. We didn't think you'd turn against us like this. Something inside me snapped. You didn't just take money. I said, you took trust. You stole my future and then blamed me for being hurt. The room went silent. A family friend becomes a witness. Victoria had one last card to play. She invited someone to join the mediation, a witness. Her name was Lisa. A longtime friend of my mom's, she had been at our house countless times growing up, warm, observant, soft-spoken. Lisa stepped in quietly, handed Victoria a USB drive, then sat down. I didn't want to get involved, she said, but I was there a few months ago, the night they talked about the house money. I blinked. What? She looked at me with gentle sadness. They were drinking wine, celebrating Mark's baby news. Your dad said something like, It's a good thing Alex has that money saved. It's time he gave something back. She paused. Your mom didn't disagree. She said it wouldn't hurt you, that you'd get over it, and that it was for the greater good. My parents stared at her like she'd spoken in tongues. Lisa, my mother hissed, you're mistaken. No, Mary, Lisa said calmly, I'm not. The truth shattered the last illusion I was clinging to. They hadn't acted impulsively. They had planned this. Lisa looked at me one last time. You deserve to know the full story. I'm sorry. She stood and left. The aftermath. That day marked the shift. Victoria submitted the initial documents for civil suit. We didn't go nuclear, not yet, but we filed enough to freeze the transferred funds, including a lien against the property Mark had just purchased using my money. He looked like he'd swallowed a stone. Their lawyer tried to negotiate, tried to minimize, but Victoria was prepared. She wasn't just fighting for money, she was fighting for boundaries, for dignity, for justice. My parents were furious. They stopped trying to guilt-trip me and started threatening. "You'll regret this." One message said, "We're still your parents." Another warned. I didn't respond. I let the legal work do the talking. Social fallout. It didn't take long for the news to leak. Not because I made a scene, but because they did. They started telling friends and family that I was attacking them, twisting the narrative. But people aren't stupid. When someone sues their own family, it gets people talking, asking questions, and as details slipped out about the money, the betrayal, the mediation, their version unraveled. Some relatives took their side. "It's just money." They said, "Let it go." Others, quiet observers for years, sent me messages of support. "We always knew something wasn't right." One cousin wrote, "I'm proud of you." And then the real blow landed. A local business partner of my dad's, someone who knew the situation, pulled out of a pending deal, citing ethics concerns. My parents were livid. I was relieved. The conversation I needed. A week later, I got a voicemail from Mark. "Alex, I messed up. I really did. I should have said no. Should have stood up to them. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you find peace." It wasn't a fix. It didn't change the past. But it was the first time someone had taken responsibility. That night, I didn't feel happy. But I did feel lighter. The legal battle didn't go to trial. It rarely does when people realize how bad things could get under a courtroom spotlight. After the witness testimony, digital records, and that devastating mediation session, their lawyer reached out to propose a settlement. They wanted it quiet, fast, contained. Victoria let me read the offer. They'd return a significant portion of the money, not all, but enough to show they understood they were exposed. Mark would forfeit any future financial gifts linked to my account, and in return, I'd sign a non-disclosure agreement. No social media, no interviews, no tarnishing their name. I laughed when I read it. Not because it was funny, because it was so on brand. They cared more about their reputation than their son, more about silence than sincerity. Victoria looked at me and said, "We can push, we can go all the way, but this gets you back on your feet faster." I sat with it. In the end, I agreed, not because I wanted to protect them, but because I wanted to protect myself. Fighting them wasn't my future. Freedom was. We finalized the settlement. They wired the funds to a new, secure account. Victoria added extra legal protections, new boundaries they couldn't cross even if they tried. It wasn't the full $145,000, but it was enough. Enough to breathe. The final message. Before blocking their numbers, I sent one last text. Not angry, not emotional, just final. "You didn't just take my money, you took away my trust. You showed me that family to you means control, not care. I've learned something from all this, and I won't forget it. Don't contact me again." And then I blocked every number. Emails, socials, everything. I was done. Starting over. With the settlement money, I didn't rush to buy a house. I rented a small apartment in a quiet part of town, 1 bedroom, clean, safe, mine. I started rebuilding slowly. I bought a used couch that didn't sag in the middle, cooked real meals again, reorganized my life not around saving but around living. I started therapy. Not just to heal from the betrayal, but to unpack all the invisible scars, the constant pressure to prove myself, the lingering belief that my worth was tied to how useful I was to other people. The therapist asked me, "When did you first feel responsible for everyone else's happiness?" The answer came out without thinking, when I realized my brother didn't have to be, and they still loved him more. She nodded. That's the beginning of your story, but not the end. Real family. Real friends. During the hardest weeks, I expected to feel alone. But I wasn't. Jamie checked in daily, dropped off groceries, sat with me when I couldn't speak. Uncle Dean, my dad's younger brother, the black sheep of the family, sent me a message out of nowhere. Heard what happened. Not surprised. They've always been better at appearances than at empathy. You did the right thing. We had coffee. He told me stories about how my parents used to shame him for not measuring up, how Mark reminded him of my dad when they were younger, how he always suspected they'd turn on me when I stopped playing by their rules. It was the first honest conversation I'd had with a blood relative in years. An unexpected message. One morning, months later, I woke up to an email from Mia, Mark's girlfriend. We'd never been close. She'd always seemed quiet on the fringe of family gatherings. Her message was short, sincere. I didn't know how badly they hurt you. I didn't understand it all until after. I'm sorry for my part in it. Mark and I split up. Too much pressure, too many lies. You deserve better than what they did to you. It didn't fix anything. But it felt like a tiny thread of truth, and that mattered. The first brick. 6 months after the settlement, I put down a deposit. Not on a house. On land. A small plot outside the city. Quiet, surrounded by trees, just big enough to one day build something I could truly call mine. The foundation hadn't been poured yet, but I stood there, boots in the dirt, wind in my hair, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not borrowed. Not conditional. Mine. What I've learned. You can love people deeply and still need to protect yourself from them. Blood isn't a shield from consequences. Some wounds don't come from strangers. They come from people who use your love as leverage. But surviving that, walking away. That is power. I lost a lot. I lost faith in people I thought would die for me. I lost years of effort in one cold transaction. But I gained something far more valuable. Boundaries. Self-respect. And a future where no one else gets to decide what I owe or who I have to be. To you, reading this now. If you've been hurt by the people closest to you, if you've ever been told you're selfish for setting boundaries, if you've ever been made to feel like your value depends on what you can give, please hear me when I say this. You are not the problem. You are not selfish. You are allowed to walk away even if it means walking alone. Sometimes freedom costs everything. But it's still worth it. And sometimes, starting over at zero is exactly where your real story begins. It's been over a year now. A year since I walked out of that house with just a duffel bag, a hollow chest, and a phone full of missed calls. Since I stood in that motel room, realizing my future had been gutted by the people who claimed to love me most. But here's what no one tells you about walking away from toxic family. You don't just lose them, you lose the version of yourself that needed them to love you. And that is a gift. Rebuilding from ashes. The land I bought became more than a project, it became a symbol. At first, I didn't know if I'd build anything permanent. I just went out there sometimes to stand under the sky, breathe, let the silence soak into my bones. Then I started sketching ideas. A cabin, a tiny home, something just for me. I took workshops, learned woodworking basics, saved slowly but steadily. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. No one to ask permission. No one to tell me I owed them. Just my 2 hands, my plans, and peace. The people who stay. Some friendships didn't survive the fallout. There were those who told me to forgive. They're your family, they said, as if biology was some magical pass for betrayal. But others, the real ones, stayed. Jamie never let me disappear into silence. She'd drag me out for walks, coffee, or just to sit on her porch in silence. My coworker Brian, who barely knew me before, started inviting me to game nights. No pity, no pressure, just inclusion. And Uncle Dean became something unexpected, a real father figure. We talked every week about work, about memories, about how messed up our family's emotional wiring was. We didn't fix everything, but we built something new. One conversation I never expected. 6 months after the dust settled, I ran into Mark. It was a fluke, a gas station. We locked eyes across the parking lot like characters in some indie drama. He looked rough, thinner, tired. He walked over. No smugness, no swagger. I deserved everything that happened, he said. I didn't reply, just waited. I was selfish, he continued, and cowardly. I let them steal from you, and I acted like it wasn't a big deal. I'll never ask you to forgive me, I just wanted you to know. I nodded. I believe you, I said, but we're not brothers anymore, not in the way that counts. He lowered his head, I know. And just like that, we parted. No drama, no fight, just a quiet recognition of a bridge that burned itself to ashes. Turning pain into purpose. I started sharing pieces of my story online. First, anonymously, a blog, then slowly under my own name. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers, people who had gone through similar betrayals, who thought they were alone in being used by those they loved. Some cried reading my words, some got angry, but most just said, "Thank you for making me feel seen." It became a mission. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was advocating. Talking about financial abuse, emotional manipulation, the myth of unconditional family love. I got invited to a podcast, then another, then a speaking event at a local nonprofit that helps young adults transition out of toxic households. For the first time in my life, I felt like my voice had weight. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I had something worth saying. The first real holiday. Last Christmas, I didn't visit my parents. Didn't do the usual guilt-laced dinner. Didn't field awkward questions or walk on eggshells. Instead, I hosted a dinner at my place. Small, cozy, just a few friends, Uncle Dean, Jamie, Brian. We cooked together, ate too much, played board games late into the night, laughed until our faces hurt. There was no tension, no fake smiles, no judgment, just warmth. Joy. Real family chosen, not forced. At one point, I stepped outside into the cold, looked up at the stars, and realized this is what love's supposed to feel like. Not earned, not conditional, not weighed down by guilt. Just safe. Who I am now. I'm not rich. I didn't win some big legal payout. But I've rebuilt. I have a quiet home, a modest bank account, a job I don't hate, and a hobby that fulfills me. More importantly, I have self-respect. I don't let anyone tell me who I should be anymore. I don't perform for approval. I don't carry guilt that was never mine. And when I think about the day my parents took everything, that $145,000 that vanished, I don't feel rage anymore. I feel gratitude. Because that loss forced me to confront a truth I might have ignored for years. They were never going to see me for who I was. They only saw what I could give. To you, reading this, maybe you're not ready to walk away yet. Maybe you're still hoping they'll change. That's okay. Hope is a hard thing to kill. But please remember this. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because you share DNA. You don't have to bleed to prove your love. And being a good son or good daughter doesn't mean being a doormat. Family is not what you're born into. Family is what you choose. And freedom, even if it costs you everything you thought you had, is the most beautiful thing you'll ever build.